everybody, and welcome back to a brand new, very quick little video where we are just 24 hours away from episode 8 of series 12 of Doctor Who. So yes, we've reached the Haunting of Villa Diodati. Hopefully that's how you pronounce it. The 8th episode, as I say, which is the episode focusing around Frankenstein and Mary Shelley. This is probably one of the episodes we've kind of known a little bit about for the longest, really. I remember very early on in the sort of filming and writing process that there was mentions of an episode about Mary Shelley or about Frankenstein or something to do with that. Obviously at the time the rumour very much was linked to the Cybermen being in this episode as well in some form, and despite never being confirmed or any real leaks, my theory is still that we will see one during this episode. So first, what is Villa Diodati that is mentioned in the title of this episode? Well, it is a mansion in Switzerland that essentially back in 1816, when this episode is set, was sort of rented out for a holiday by Lord Byron and John Polidori, or however you pronounce that. Also in a nearby mansion was Mary Shelley, who was staying there as well, and I think due to some bad weather or some sort of living conditions and situations with one of the buildings, they all ended up staying in this Villa Diodati for 3 nights. And it's famous because this is where they, in particular Mary Shelley, came up with the idea of writing Frankenstein as a book, which was obviously kind of a quite major sort of horror / sci-fi type, well mainly horror novel that was created there, and that was pretty major for the development in sort of novels of that sort of style. And so this episode is going to focus on that night where they came up with this idea, and it's going to be a sort of ghost story type episode, I get the impression, where they're being haunted by something. Obviously it's called The Haunting of Villa Diodati, and maybe that will be somehow an inspiration for Mary Shelley coming up with writing Frankenstein. Though it has to be said that I believe Chris Chibnall mentioned that he didn't want to kind of completely influence the writing of Frankenstein and not make it by the Doctor's caused or some alien in this episode has caused Mary Shelley to write Frankenstein. I think he wanted to try and keep it a little bit more accurate and realistic and just adding this as an extra element, I think. But it'll be very intriguing to see how it plays out. So it's going to be cool to see a nice period piece. Obviously we've seen in the trailers the Doctor and co in period outfit. We haven't seen the Doctor in any real different or period outfits up to this point. So it's going to be really nice to see her in it's like a really cool new waistcoat and everything she's got going for this episode. So I'm certainly, just from that sort of visual point of view, I'm really looking forward to that. And it's another new writer in Maxine Alderton who's penned this episode, but there's also, I can't remember if it was sort of some leaked rumours that she was going to be heavily involved in the writing of Series 13, almost as not the lead writer above Chris Chibnall, but she was going to kind of be one of the main writers of Series 13 to come. So that certainly suggests that based on this episode, Chris had a lot of confidence in her own writer. So I'm kind of quite excited from that point of view for this episode, because it sounds like she's got some fairly major writing talent, I think. In terms of the main plot, we don't know huge amounts apart from this sort of mysterious ghost story type thing. As I mentioned earlier, my theory is that the lone Cyberman is going to turn up in this episode. I feel like everything in the sort of synopsis and the trailers and everything for episode 9 and 10 all seem to imply a big cyber army by that point. But yet Captain Jack told us in episode 5 that the Cybermen are completely destroyed down to their last one type thing. And it doesn't really, to me, sound like that's going to be the focus of episode 9. So I get the impression that later in this episode, we're going to see a Cyberman turn up, and then things are going to go rather wrong, I think. And as it mentioned in the synopsis, it says the Doctor is forced into a decision of earth-shattering proportions, which certainly sounds fairly major and a little bit more than just a fun ghost story type episode that we've got going there. So yeah, my strong theory, which is not based on leaks or rumours or spoilers or anything like that, it's purely my theory, is that the lone Cyberman is going to turn up late in this episode, not from early on, but towards the end of the episode. We'll get this whole, what does the lone Cyberman want? I don't know what they want, but they'll ask for it. Presumably they'll ask the Doctor for it, the Doctor will give it to them, and then it will all kind of completely rebuild their army somehow, and then that will lead us into the following episode where there's a massive cyber army and a big cyber war going on, I think, for episode 9, which is certainly something I'm really, really excited about to see. So certainly I think that the Cyberman we saw in the Series 12 trailers, the one that looked all sort of rustic and destroyed, has got to be this lone Cyberman that's turning up in this episode. I struggle to see where that is going to fit into episode 9 or episode 10. So I think it's a pretty good logical assumption to make that we might just see a Cyberman this week. But overall, I think it should just be a really fun and entertaining and hopefully quite creepy episode as well, focusing on ghosts. What are these ghosts going to be? We don't really know what the kind of, unless it is just this lone Cyberman as a villain, we don't really know what the sort of villain of this story actually is. We've never seen anything in any of the trailers or any particular rumours or anything like that apart from this Cyberman. So I'll be intrigued to see if there is anything else, or if it is just the lone Cyberman that turns out to be that. But I also just want to say that a more general comment on some of the promotion at the moment is the next time trailers that we've been seeing at the end of each Doctor Who episode, not gonna lie, are complete trash. Like, They are pretty awful 8 to 10 second clips of a future episode that doesn't really get you excited at all about this episode. Like, I think there was about 2 or 3 actual shots in the next time trailer for this episode, which just doesn't get you excited about it. So yeah, it's a bit of a shame that they seem to be quite so poor in doing their trailers or the next time trailers. It's like they just don't want to give anything away. But maybe, of course, that is because it's full of Cybermen. So yes, there's not that much more to say about it at the moment because we don't know much more about this episode, but The Haunting of Villa Diodati is coming up tomorrow at 7:10 on BBC One. So do not miss it. I'm sure you're going to want to watch it, and I'm sure it's going to be a very exciting one, particularly if we do get this Cyberman and the link into the finale as well. I'd love to hear your guys' theories on this episode. What are you expecting might happen? What are you most excited for about this episode? I'd love to hear your comments down below. But apart from that, as always, hit that like button, that subscribe button if you're new here, and I'll see you again very soon for another one. Goodbye.